And now, stand-up community subscribers and listeners from around the globe, it's time to Stand Up with Pete Dominic, where we ask the important questions that impact you, your family, and your community. Such as, would it still be considered a cult if I ate dinner with my parents just before taking the blood oath? And is my bed mattress burrowing into my side with its aging springs, or is it just my lovable Labrador going crotch hunting? And now, the podcast host who would never let a sprained ankle deter him from turning his lounge vest into a social media frenzy, Pete Dominic!
Yes, Pico, thank you very much for another excellent introduction, and welcome to episode 442 of Stand Up. Joining me today, comedian David Feldman and activist, writer, and humorist herself, Maura Quint. Although if you're listening to this podcast before, say, I don't know, around 11 a.m., I haven't dropped the Maura interview in yet because we had to get together on Monday morning itself. If you're listening after 11, Maura's conversation with me should lead us off. And if you've noticed that my microphone quality is a little bit different, then you are amazing. You're an audiophile. Congratulations. What a weekend for me. My ankle went down, my equipment went down, and here I am recording old school. Well, I've got a workaround, so hopefully it's not too bad here at the top. But yeah, this is going to be a different week here on the show because my mixing board has gone bad. I have to send it in to get repaired. I bought a backup one that is not going to arrive from Australia till like Friday. So even the guest interviews might sound a little different, but I am going to muddle through it and post every day like the plan was, I think. I may pull the parachute at some point, but I love having you guys along the ride with me and supporting me regardless of this. I'm trying to do my best, and you guys are so appreciative and understanding of all of it, knowing it's a one-man band here each and every day talking to two of the smartest, best people I can for you to learn and navigate along the journey with me. So thank you guys very much for rolling with the punches here. Hopefully it's not too much of an issue, and I greatly appreciate your support. Welcome to new subscribers this week, and I hope you had a great weekend. I mentioned, or Pete did, I think, that I injured myself over the weekend. I was standing on the bed I built here in the shed, reaching up to get a piece of equipment, trying to fix my whole sitch here, and I fell like one step, about a foot and a half, and my ankle rolled into the ground. It's blown up. It's pretty swollen, but I don't think it's too bad of a sprain or a break. So I'll wait a couple days and see how it goes. But I'm not going to complain to you too much about that. It's just been it's frustrating. I think it's frustrating, as we all know, that you have coping mechanisms and different things that you do to adapt to whatever's happening in your life. And for me, when things are happening, when I have adversity, I certainly like to get outside. I certainly like to exercise and move around, but can't do that with a blown up ankle. So that was depressing. And I ended up in a hammock and reading some books, which was my workaround, but you got to find ways to adapt. I try to find ways to move forward, but I'm not going to lie to you, got pretty depressing at times over the weekend. But you got to talk about these things. That's why I talk about them with you here on the podcast. That's why I talk about what I'm struggling with, knowing that you've struggled with similar issues or completely different ones, and that we talk about them in person on the Hangouts. It's really important to talk this stuff out, especially to guys, and I think as well some women as well, who are afraid to have these discussions and to be vulnerable. I'm always going to try to be as honest and open as I can and talk about my stuff to role model the kind of behavior that I think is helpful for us to be more resilient and adapt to challenging times. And we are all in a challenging time. I mean, it is not changing that quickly. We're looking at a lot of things that are happening, seemingly getting worse around our country, concerns about our democracy and the future of the planet, and obviously continued concerns around the pandemic and COVID. So there's never any shortage of issues to discuss, and I've got two great guests joining me to discuss them both today. But first, I'm going to try to muddle through a bit of a news segment, talk about a little bit about what happened this weekend. Time for the last 24. You know what? Fuck it. I found a way to pull audio. It's going to be tougher, but I'm going to try to do it for you. And this first piece of audio comes from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos, and he had the CEO of Pfizer. I'm not sure what his ethnicity is, this guy. He's obviously not American. I'm just trying to place his accent. Anyway, his name is Albert Bourla, and I'm playing this because he provided a very important update on Pfizer's plan to roll out coronavirus vaccines for children. Last week, Pfizer announced their last vaccine trials showed a significant level of effectiveness among kids aged 5 to 11, and they're going to seek emergency use authorization from the FDA. Here he is talking to George. George!
Let's talk about children's vaccines. Pfizer announced this week that the vaccine was safe for children 5 to 11. When should they be eligible for the vaccine?
I think we are going to submit this data pretty soon. It's a question of days, not weeks. And then it is up to FDA to be able to review the data and come to their conclusions and approve it or not. If they approve it, we will be ready with our manufacturing to provide this new formulation of the vaccine, because the vaccine that the kids will receive, which is 5 to 11, it is a different formulation. It is almost not almost, it's 1/3 of the dose that we are giving to the rest of the population.
All right, well, the New York Police Department Commissioner of Police, his name is Dermot Shea, and he sent a video message to his police officers urging them to get the COVID-19 vaccine after 8 unvaccinated members of the department were hospitalized, and a significant percentage has yet to get the shot. Here is 62% of the NYPD have received at least one dose of the vaccine, apparently, but more than a third remain unvaccinated. In the video, the police commissioner told officers that he was speaking to them because he had been having to speak to their family members and partners when it's too late, when you're in the hospital or you're driving to the hospital and you're having difficulty breathing. Listen to the head of the NYPD pleading with his police officers to get vaccinated.
Why do I keep coming back to you on this? I'll tell you why. Because I'm talking to family members. I'm talking to union representatives of multiple ranks. I'm talking to you and your partners when it's too late. When you're in the hospital or you're driving to the hospital and you're having difficulty breathing. Right now we have 8 members of the NYPD in the hospital, all 8 unvaccinated. Serious condition. Some intubated, some perfectly healthy, one 23 years old. One person hadn't gone sick in 10 years, and we recently lost him.
All right, so that is New York's finest, and they're still not getting vaccinated, too many of them. I now want to take you over to Face the Nation. This is going good. I think I can pull this audio. Maybe it's not going to be that hard. Where Margaret Brennan had the CDC director, Rochelle Walensky, up, and she asked her several questions. Great interview, but she talked about the Delta variant and how it continues to fuel the surge of COVID-19 cases in the U.S., and she asked her if she still feels that sense of impending doom that she was criticized for.
You said back in March you had a feeling of impending doom. You took a lot of flack for saying that in those terms. But indeed. But we were on the cusp of the Delta surge. We are now back at 2,000 deaths a day. How do you feel now?
You look at states around this country and you see places that are using crisis standards of care. That is not, and that means that we are talking about who is going to get a ventilator, who is going to get an ICU bed. Those are not easy discussions to have, and that is not a place we want our healthcare system to ever be.
Is that Is that what you meant when you said impending doom? What you're seeing now? Crisis levels of care?
In some states, yes, they are running out of beds. And when you see that, you worry that people may not be able to come in and get the proper care if they have a motor vehicle accident or if they're having a heart attack. And that is why we are working so hard in areas that have high levels of disease where they can't, their healthcare systems are in dire straits, that working to get assistance to them, working to get those communities vaccinated, because as I noted, people who are not vaccinated are 10 times more likely to be in the hospital. Our hospitals are filled with unvaccinated people.
All right. She also, let's go a little bit more with Dr. Walensky on CBS. And Margaret Brennan asked her about schools and how we're doing there.
Infections among children 5 to 11 are at the highest they've ever seen on a weekly basis, according to your agency's data. Are schools vectors of transmission? Is this where kids are getting sick?
Our science has actually demonstrated that the disease generally comes in from the community, and that when schools are practicing the proper mitigation and prevention strategies, it's not where the transmission is actually happening. So just this week, we had 2 studies published. Over 96% of schools just in this school year have been able to remain open. And yet we also published a study out of Arizona that demonstrated that places that had no masks in place were 3.5 times more likely to have outbreaks than places that did have masks in place. So we know how to keep them safe. And when we don't use the proper mitigation strategies, they're more likely to have outbreaks and have to close.
And finally, the most important question to me, should kids go trick-or-treating this Halloween? The answer is yes. But here's Dr. Walensky.
Just very quickly before I let you go, should kids go trick-or-treating on Halloween? Is it safe?
Oh, gosh, I certainly hope so. If you're able to be outdoors, absolutely limit crowds. I wouldn't necessarily go to a crowded Halloween party, but I think that we should be able to let our kids go trick-or-treating in small groups, and I hope that we can do that this year. Before I go, if you're not vaccinated, please get vaccinated. If you're eligible for a boost, go get your boost.
All right, let's go from COVID news to the despicable governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, who was on Fox News Sunday with Chris Wallace, who repeatedly confronted the Texas governor whether he would support a rape and incest exception for the state's abortion law. Tough to hear, but it's important to hear and to tell your friends. This used to be extreme. I think it still is very extreme, and I think most people would want to know this. In one of the most populated states in the country where they still haven't expanded Medicaid, they're also going to make, it's horrible, rape and incest. They're going to force women to give birth. It's just too tough to even talk about. Here it is.
Almost 15,000 cases of rape were reported in your state of Texas, and almost everyone says that that's a severe undercount. There are a lot more cases that just aren't reported. Is it reasonable to say to somebody who is the victim of rape and might not understand that they are pregnant, until 6 weeks, well, don't worry about it because we're going to eliminate rape as a problem in the state of Texas?
Well, there's multiple things I have to say in answer to this, but the first thing, obviously, is that survivors of sexual assault, they deserve support, care, and compassion. And Texas is stepping up to make sure that we provide that by signing a law and creating in the governor's office a sexual assault survivors task force. But separately from that, Chris, I got to point out about the ways that I have fought to to arrest and apprehend and try to eliminate rape. I sought the death penalty.
But Governor, excuse me, because we are running out of time. There were more than 15,000 rapes in 2019 when you were governor. Let me just ask this question. A state representative, Republican state representative, says that he's going to offer a new measure that would restore the exception to the Texas abortion law for victims of rape and incest. If that came to your desk, will you sign it or not?
Well, we got to go back, Chris, to what the reason was why the law was passed in the first place. And the goal is to protect the lives of every child with a heartbeat. And so we're working to achieve that goal. Chris, I got to point this out,
including
Chris,
the child of a rape.
This goal is consistent with what the United States Supreme Court has written, and that is states have the ability to make sure that we protect the health and safety of both the mother and the child, and that's what we are seeking to do here. And I have to add this, and that is Texas just provided more than $100 million in funding for pregnancy centers across the state of Texas to help those who want to make sure that they will be able to carry a child.
Just to lock this down, are you saying, sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but are you saying that you will not sign an exception for rape and incest?
Well, first I got to tell you, Chris, you're making a hypothetical that it's not going to happen because that bill is not going to reach my desk. But second, again, the goal is to protect the life of every child with a heartbeat.
So just to be clear, in case you didn't hear, the answer is no. The answer is no. These men in Texas have made this law preventing women from being able to terminate a pregnancy, an unwanted pregnancy that was a result of a rape or incest. It's so beyond reprehensible and disgusting. How anybody can possibly support such a thing is just, I don't know. Where are you people? I want to talk to you. Actually, I don't. Don't call me. Just gross. We have to stop them. We have to do everything we can to protect our daughters from this horrible, horrible man and all of his friends in Gilead. All right, let's go to the Secretary of Homeland Security, who continues to get grilled. He is on CNN's State of the Union talking about the latest update on the Haitian refugees.
About 4,000 actually have been expelled under the Public Health Authority of the Centers for Disease Control. There are about 13,000 that are in immigration court proceedings. When we do not expel an individual by reason of the public health imperative, those individuals are actually placed in immigration court proceedings. They go before a judge. They can make a claim of asylum or other claim to remain in the United States. If the judge approves that claim, they are, under the law, able to remain. If the judge denies it, then they are removed from the United States.
And here is the Vice President Kamala Harris on The View talking about the horrible inhumanity that these Haitian folks were suffering on our border at the hands of American Border Patrol, which, of course, is overseen by the federal government, which, of course, is overseen by the Harris-Biden administration. Here's Kamala Harris, Biden-Harris, on The View.
And you've been tasked with immigration. How do you explain this?
Well, first of all, I've been very clear about the images that you and I both saw of those law enforcement officials on horses. I was outraged by it. It was horrible and deeply troubling. There's been now an investigation that is being conducted, which I fully support, and there needs to be consequence and accountability. Human beings should not be treated that way, and as we all know, it also evoked images of some of the worst moments of our history where that kind of behavior has been used against the indigenous people of our country, has been used against African Americans during times of slavery. And so I'm glad to know that Ali Mayorkas, the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, is taking it very seriously.
Well, I just saw this headline going back to the despicable Greg Abbott. Governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, says that Texas will hire the Border Patrol agents punished by the Biden administration. I mean, it's crazy. He said the person who took those pictures said that the characterization that the Democrats have made about the Border Patrol using them as whips, whipping people who were coming across the border is false. They were simply maneuvering horses, he said. Wow. We all saw those videos and pictures, and it was reprehensible. And even if they were, quote, maneuvering horses, that was wrong, too. So, anyway, what an unbelievable creep Greg Abbott is. Okay, so now I want to move on to Liz Cheney, who was on 60 Minutes last night on Sunday, and she said anyone who thinks Trump is going to disappear if you ignore him has been proven wrong. Here she is on the January 6th committee.
Have members of Congress, Republicans, come up to you privately and whispered in your ear, "Way to go, Liz," and encouraged you, but won't come forward and say that publicly?
Yes.
A lot.
Yes. Both in the House and the Senate.
I mean, if they really think what you're doing is right and they admire it and they encourage it and they won't do it, what is that?
The argument that you often hear is that if you do something that's perceived as against Trump, that, you'll put yourself in political peril. And that's a self-fulfilling prophecy, because if Republican leaders don't stand up and condemn what happened, then the voices in the party that are so dangerous will only get louder and stronger.
polls say that 78% of Republicans do not think that Joe Biden was legitimately elected. And I wonder, how do you fight an untruth? How do you stand up to the anti-vaxxers? How do you stand up to QAnon? How do you stand up to a president who says the election, and falsely, that the election was rigged?
When you look at the spread of these mistruths and the spread of the disinformation, silence enables it. Silence enables the liar, and silence helps it to spread. So the first thing you have to do is say, no, I'm not going to accept that we're going to live in a post-truth world. It's a toxin, Leslie, in our political bloodstream. Because when we allow that to continue to go on in the face of rulings of the courts, in the face of recounts, in the face of everything that's gone on to demonstrate that there was not fraud that would have changed the outcome, then if we do that, we are contributing to the undermining of our system. And it's a really serious and dangerous moment because of that.
All right. Well, that is all the audio I pulled for you. Somehow figured out how to do that without my mixer. But before I get to the news dump, Liz Cheney also hit Trump ahead of a fundraiser with former President Bush. And she wrote, remember when, of course, President Trump said, I like people who don't get captured, in reference to McCain becoming a POW and that horrible type of phrasing. Well, Liz Cheney said, I like Republican presidents who win re-election. She used that with Bush, who was a Republican president who won re-election and was headlining an upcoming fundraiser. So anyway, thought that was interesting and worth sharing. But now it's time to get to the rest of headlines. You might have heard, you might not have. It's time for the news dump. And today's news dump is a tribute to the Hard Rock Cat, that cat who at the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami, it fell from the upper deck and was caught by fans below holding an American flag. Anyway, here's what Pete Coe did with it.
Hashtag Hard Rock Cat lands safely with a thump. His rescuers weren't so lucky for today's news dump.
Okay, thank you, Pete Coe. Hilarious as always. And what do I have for you, headlines-wise? I like this one. A Democratic proposal to help finance the party's $3.5 trillion spending bill by taxing single-use plastics, generating sharp pushback from single-use plastics. How about that? Members of the plastics industry, specifically a trade organization called the American Chemistry Council that represents 28 companies, including the oil giants who make the main ingredient in single-use plastic. The Senate Finance Committee is weighing the idea of a tax on the sale of virgin plastic resin. The base materials used to make single-use plastics is one potential way to pay for the mammoth spending bill. I love it. Apple is going to... I was at the Apple store. I brought my daughter to the Apple store to get her phone fixed, and it's the first time I've been to the Apple store. I think I might want to... They convinced me I needed a new case. I didn't need a new case when I went in there, but they convinced me that I did need a new case, and that's how marketing and capitalism works. I didn't get one, though, folks, but they have me wanting it. Anyway, Apple is going to now allow users to upload their COVID-19 vaccination card to the Wallet app to provide easy access to proof of vaccination. Like using MetroCards and credit cards, showing vaccination through the Wallet app can be utilized by businesses or venues as form of verification. So I like that headline. That's a helpful thing to do. Speaking of vaccines, apparently there's this one NBA star named Kyrie Irving. I think I know who he is. But he might be barred from home games because he apparently is reportedly refusing to receive the coronavirus vaccine. So, who is this guy, Kyrie Irving? Doesn't he date like one of the Kardashians or something? I don't know what I'm talking about, but this is terrible. He's the star of the Brooklyn Nets, and he's not getting the vaccine. In New York has a mandate for the vaccine where he plays. I mean, what an idiot. He's hurting himself and his team and his reputation over this. Terrible. I like this news, though. In Iceland, we now have the first female majority European Parliament. Iceland nearly elected its first female majority parliament after an election where, it's nearly elected, where the country's center-right party won most of the seats. According to an initial vote count on Sunday, female candidates won 33 of 63 seats in Iceland's parliament, which is known as the Althing, according to the Associated Press. Did I pronounce that right? The Althing. A recount that took place hours later in Western Iceland showed the female candidates, however, only won 30 seats, just missing the majority. Despite the recount, Norway's election outcome still represents the largest percentage of female lawmakers in Europe at 48%. And speaking of Norway, the restrictions on lockdowns ended in Norway over the weekend, and police there on Sunday reported dozens of disturbances and violent clashes, including mass brawls in their big cities after streets, bars, restaurants, and nightclubs were filled by celebrating people at the end of the restrictions. That's a disconcerting headline. Chaotic scenes ensuing the capital, Oslo, and others. Yeah, it's interesting how we are all reacting and coping and now apparently fighting in the streets as these protocols are changing. Cheers rang out. I'm staying in Europe for another story. In Switzerland, where hugs were exchanged and rainbow-colored flags waved overhead across Switzerland as the Swiss resoundingly voted to allow same-sex couples to marry. Final results of the nationwide referendum showed on Sunday. So, great news in Switzerland. The measure passed 64.1% of the vote. In Germany, they also had an election, and the results there are being contended. It's close. It looks like they're leaning left, though, even though the Christian Democrats won quite a few seats as well. So I'm still confused at this point what's going on in Germany. Russian fighters apparently Russian fighter jets escorted U.S. Air Force bomber after it reportedly approached Russian airspace. Kind of scary. Over the Pacific Ocean, according to the Russian state news agency. So who knows? I have to believe that. There were no violations of Russia's state border during the episode, apparently, but they said 3 Russian fighters were scrambled to escort a U.S. strategic bomber, which was approaching their airspace. No, that's fun. Fun times. And lastly, I think this is lastly. Do I have anything else? Yeah, it's the Tony Awards. Oh, the Tony Awards. They happened last night, the 74th Tony Awards, Sunday night after a long delay due to the pandemic. The event honored shows from the 2019-2020 Broadway season. And leading the nominations was Jagged Little Pill, by Alanis Morissette's 1995 album of the same name, with 15 nominations. Now, I don't have the winners, but you can look them up if that's something you're interested in. Oh, here's one more story. I thought this was funny. Fox News has banned Rudy Giuliani, apparently. Fox News has banned Rudy Giuliani and his son from appearing on the network, according to Politico. Wow. Giuliani, who served as personal attorney for former President Trump, has been banned for close to 3 months and only learned of the move by the news network right before September 11th. Yikes. Wonder what that's all about. I could tell you if I continue to read that story, but I really don't care. I'm just happy that he's not going to be on TV in at least one more place. By the way, I don't know if this is true or not, but I saw someone tweet that you can call your cable provider and ask for certain networks, kind of a la carte. You could take off the, all those right-wing nutty networks if you want and save money. I don't know if that works or not, but if it does and you get a deal, let me know and I'll promote the hell out of that more. Okay, that is today's news dump, and I wonder how this show is going so far because I'm doing it so differently. I'm very uncomfortable. Let me know. standupwithpete@gmail.com. It would have been funnier, but it's hard to edit the way I normally do. So, but still going. I'm doing it, nailing it, I think, kind of. What do you think? So now, though, I've got my first guest joining me is David Feldman. He was on the show a couple weeks ago. We had a wonderful conversation. And so I invited him back on the show. I've also got Maura Quint joining me. And she is, maybe if you haven't started listening, if you started listening before like 11 o'clock, Maura might not make the show because we had to tape it on Monday. Long story, but with my equipment issues, I couldn't get it done Sunday night. So I've got just David Feldman, unless you're listening after 11 o'clock and you won't hear this, and Maura will drop later. The reason I'm saying is those of you want to hear Maura, and I hope that you do, check it out after 11. Just refresh, and it should upload. If you're a subscriber, it will be changed on the Patreon as well. But David Feldman joins me right now. He is a very funny comedian, comedy writer. He's got an awesome podcast, The David Feldman Show. He's written for Roseanne, Dennis Miller, Real Time with Bill Maher, Spike Fierstein, Jon Stewart, and so much more. He's also written for the Academy Awards, the Emmys, and he's written with Steve Martin and Martin Short. He's just done it all. And he's also appeared on The Conan O'Brien Show, Tonight Show, Late Late Show, and his own comedy special for Comedy Central. And I love catching up with him. We talk politics, we talk life. He always makes me laugh really, really hard. And here is my latest conversation with comedian David Feldman. Check out all the information on him in the show notes, and definitely check out his podcast. Here we go.
No, that Jewish people's back hurt.
Because they're always telling you what's hurting them. What's bothering
them. I changed my name for show business. I was David Backhurt.
Oh, is that right? How long did you...
I was born David Backhurt.
Oh.
My middle name was Oidasmai.
Do you... I'm going to press record. I forgot to record.
Oh, okay.
I was recording on one device, though, so I still got that backstory from you.
Right. I don't normally share that with people.
Don't you think that Jewish people are in general just more emotive about all of their emotions? They're more vocal about most of their life and emotions in general. Isn't that a good thing, even though it's jokingly easy to say it's annoying?
Jewish people will tell you how they're feeling. There's no filter. Generally speaking, they'll tell you exactly what they're thinking, because they think.
I feel like I can see a Jewish man coming much. The difference between a Jewish man and, say, like a Christian or almost any other man, like a Catholic Italian or Irish type, for a specific reason I'd like to talk about.
Like when you're walking down the street and you see a Jewish man like me approaching, do you walk to the other side of the street?
No, I don't do that for anybody.
Okay. Suppose it's late at night.
Yeah.
It's like 3 a.m, and you see a Jewish man like me approaching, and you're thinking, oh my God, I'm all alone on the street. There's a Jewish man coming towards me, and he's going to tell me how bad his meal was tonight. He's going to corner me and force me to hear for 45 minutes how bad the meal was.
Yeah. I would enjoy that, I think.
That doesn't scare you?
No, I love people. I love even people with some kind of mental illness that they're standing in the subway doing gibberish. As long as it's like, if it's entertaining, I'm for it. I mean, if they're talking about their pain and they're yelling racism, but I'm interested in people. But I think.
Oh, well, let me ask you another question. Okay, I'm Jewish, right?
Yeah.
It's 3 a.m. You're all alone on a dark street in Brooklyn. I sneak up behind you, hold a gun to your back, and say, take my money. Let me lend it to you at exorbitant interest rates. Take my money. Hands out. Wouldn't that scare you if I forced you to take my money?
That would be unsettling, to say the least. Yeah, well, because the thing is, it's not only that you're forcing me to take this loan on, but you also have a snub-nosed pistol in the small of my back, and that seems...
Well, it didn't start off as a snub-nose. I had some work done on it.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Why am I... I'm Jewish. I'm a proud Jew. Why am I doing this? Why would I... I'm so desperate to be liked, I would throw my own people down the river.
I want to play on stereotypes with you a little bit, because I also want to ask your thoughts on, like, the Republican Party, the Democratic Party. But while we're still talking about Jews, I feel like I can tell the difference between a Jewish man and a non-Jewish man walking down the street. Because, for example, these are just generalizations, but like if you see like a tanned, muscly guy with a tight shirt and spiky hair, I don't think he's Jewish. He could be, but I don't think he is. If you see a guy just kind of more frumpy, more nebbishy is the word, I think. Maybe he's focused. I don't know. I think, well, that guy might be Jewish. I think that there's a toxic masculinity that Jewish men don't often have.
We have toxic femininity. We tend to be, most people think I'm gay.
Yeah.
Because I talk in an effeminate way. I prefer men to women. So most people think I'm gay. But I'm not. I'm not gay. I have heterosexual sex with men, but there's nothing gay. No, Jewish men tend to be more effeminate, at least where I grew up, because it's a matriarchal society. So the mother is more important than the father. So I'm more likely to pick up the habits of my mother.
How is the mother more important than the father?
She runs the house.
That makes her more important. The father is out, I think probably dealing diamonds or buying buildings.
Well, not necessarily diamonds. I don't like those. They're rubies too, and gold.
What did your dad do? Did your dad carry a satchel of jewels? And what else did he do?
First of all, my all four of my grandparents were immigrants. So I want to talk about what's going on along the border, if we can get to it, because I am deeply offended by what's going on the border. All four of my grandparents were refugees, and they worked their way up by being Border Patrol officers. So I'm very, this is a disgusting moment. It really is. I feel even that joke made me feel guilty.
Okay, so the moment that you want to talk about based on your background here, and let's go, is the Haitian folks seeking asylum under a bridge on the Texas border, and how
let's go back to, I was just going to say that, I think a new generation, my children's generation, they didn't grow up with that dynamic where it was a matriarchal culture. Women's liberation came about, but when I was growing up, most of the households that were intact, mine was barely intact. The mother ran the house and the father did what he was told. That's changed.
Well, that's a really interesting answer to the question about why Jewish men are more likely to have more of a feminine quality and less overt masculinity, which is, I think, a good thing. I think a balance is generally a good thing, although, probably too much of either is probably a bad thing. But having a balance, but I think culturally, Jewish people also, what else is it that they don't turn to? Weights, tanning, their vehicles. That's another thing. Like, do you ever see a Jewish guy driving around in a big black pickup truck with roll coal, coming out of it, and it's all jacked up, and even the tires are masculine, and they have spikes, like the spikes coming out of the wheels. Have you seen these? Do you get out of your apartment?
Yeah, I've seen them. Yes.
You don't see.
We're trafficking in stereotypes. There's a very specific. We're talking about. You grew up in New York, right?
I grew up in upstate New York, so not around any Jews except for Dave Crowder, and he is a great guy and still one of my closest friends.
Right. We're talking about the Jews that we grew up on the Northeast. So yes, and of a certain generation, I was not encouraged to do anything other than read. That was it. If I was reading, no tools, no chores. If I was reading, as long as I was reading, it could be, I murdered 6 people, but I was reading while I was doing it. One eye was firing the shots. The other eye I was looking at a book.
So what's your relationship with tools today?
It's really bad. I have a mouse problem in my apartment. And I called my mother and I said, you did not raise a man. I now realize that you wanted me not to be attractive to women. You wanted me all for yourself. And you did not raise a man. Because women do want a man who can put Brillo inside a mouse hole.
And a man should want, and a woman, well, that's a great example because I always think about my wife could do anything that I can do if she wanted to, but I do a lot of it. But you give the example of the mouse. She can't do that. She has got a real huge issue with mice. So, yeah, I do take care of our mice here at my house. Well, let me get back to the Haitian, the border issue. And can I just say one thing first about that? If we had comprehensive immigration reform passed in 2013, I'm not saying this wouldn't be happening, but I am saying there would be far more in place for there to be pathways, for there to be assistance, for there to be, security. And there's been so much focus on every other issue and only on security, which they don't even do a good job at that. So I don't know if we can start back in 2013 when John Boehner didn't pass the Senate bill. He didn't even take it up for a vote because he thought it would pass. I don't know if that matters to what we're seeing.
Dreamer, you're talking about Obama's Dreamers.
That was part of that bill, but the big deal was that it passed out of the Senate. It passed, and the House, run by Republican Speaker, wouldn't take it up for a vote because it would have passed, and we would have had Dreamers, all these things that we're still arguing about, and all these issues. We had way more border security, money for border security than Trump even ever asked for. And the Republicans said no because, the cynical take is they wanted to keep it a divisive topic. And they hate immigrants. They don't want to let them in, period.
Right. Well, I don't want to be insensitive because I mean this. We were talking about mice, and I was looking at the Border Patrol horseback with whips. Doesn't get any uglier than that. And one of the things I thought about, how do you justify that rancid behavior? And I thought, my inclination would be, well, you want to feed these people, you want to take care of these people, but they look at these Haitians or any immigrants the same way I look at my mice. Don't leave food out. They really do see vermin. They don't see humanity. That's what so forget let's put the Haitians just on the back burner for a second. Look what we've done to our Border Patrol. We've turned them into monsters. I mean, they were probably already monsters, and they took the job to act out. But maybe some of them never got, had bad thoughts, but we let them pursue their most craven impulses. Look what we've become as a country. It's, and all they care about are the optics. All they care about is they got caught whipping Haitians.
They got caught droning a family.
Yeah. And they go, that's not who we are. I keep hearing that's not who we are.
Yeah.
That's who you are. If your wife walks in on you and you're masturbating to two Galapagos turtles going down on one another, as happened to me, I had some Galapagos turtle porn, and I turned to her and I go, that's not who I am. And she says, but that's the same thing you said when I walked in on you watching monkey porn.
Right.
I said, well, that's who I am.
Yeah.
That's who I am, but not the Galapagos turtle porn.
Yeah, I really feel like a great analogy to what we're seeing the United States seemingly government policy play out, which is so horrible and criminal. But the whip thing and, that's not who we are. I mean, it's so who we are. You could put it on the quarter and people be like, oh, yeah, whips.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's who we are.
But why do you hate America so much is the question. And you're making me feel and my kids feel bad about America when you talk about us this way.
Well, first of all, I don't hate America. America hates me.
They hate your act.
They hate well, so do I. I have to hear it every night. Imagine how I feel. I got to listen to this shit. I don't hate America. but I'm finding it harder and harder to come up with excuses to be patriotic.
Love it or leave it.
Patriotic, but it's getting harder.
I hate the question or the accusation, they hate America. I want to scream. Can we just talk for a few minutes? It's not that simple. It doesn't. And Republicans, everybody hates certain things about their country, their government, even their community that they live in, their family, their spouse. Let's have a nuanced, thoughtful conversation about the good and the bad and stop minimizing things to, oh, he hates America. No, you hate America if you hate democracy. How about that, Feldo?
Right. Or our government. If you hate our government, you hate America.
It's like saying you're anti-Semitic for criticizing Israel. And it's like, no, Americans are nonstop criticizing our own domestic and foreign policies. So we're also criticizing other countries' domestic and foreign policies. That's not anti-Semitic. It's I don't like Israel's policy towards the Palestinians, but I do love their development of renewable energy. And I like certain, a lot of things about their culture and their food and blah, blah, blah. But I don't hate Jews except for you.
So we haven't talked about Israel. So you don't approve of Israel's with the Palestinians? What, you think they should be stricter or ease up on them? What's your position?
I think they should hire our border patrol to get those pesky.
Then it would be, yes, then there'd be no two states. So it would just be one nation.
Well, talk about an hour-long answer to that question. I think that conflict goes thousands of years back, and you can argue either side fairly effectively in terms of rights to this and that and who won what and what treaties say and what the UN says and so on and so forth. But in the end, usually in their conflicts, the Palestinians lose thousands to just a handful, or that's not a very nice human thing, handful, several, Israelis, and more important, the Palestinians, part of why it's complicated, obviously, but the Palestinians are living in an open air prison. I mean, who wouldn't want to strike out? It's complicated, but those are my 1 minute feelings.
Mm-hmm. You want me to talk about it?
I don't really want to talk about the Middle East.
Yeah, let's move on. But
I do want to talk about that with you for sure. Let's make it next time, because I had a loose agenda items for you today.
Okay, go ahead. So I can talk about Israel. What's the word you use? Complicated?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough for me to talk about Israel because I'm of a certain generation, and I've been brainwashed. So I've been listening on my show. I only have people on my show who are highly critical of Israel. I will not have a guest on my show who will defend Israel because I pretty much am an apologist for Israel.
Right.
So I will only have guests on my show who criticize it. Oh,
okay. And you argue with them.
I don't argue. I listen, and it's getting harder and harder to apologize for the treatment of the people in Gaza. Yeah. And one of the things I've learned is that a little less than half of Israeli Jews are highly critical of the treatment of Palestinians. In America, Jews in America have an idealized vision of Israel. It's in our heads, but if you're a Jew in Israel, it's a much more realistic. It's not a fantasy, and so they're highly critical.
I find the most interesting people to talk to, surprise, surprise, are Israelis and Palestinians on this issue, people who live there, who have family there. My brother married a woman from Israel, and she grew up there, and she's a left-wing, more progressive, but her stepfather was not. Like, I love the conversations between them. I myself subscribe to a lot of Chomsky, on Israel, and so on the Middle East issue. But let me ask you, can I ask you a different question?
Yes, sir.
That's interesting to hear you say that. It makes me want to hear those specific conversations that you're having with others.
But I just for the record, I'm coming around to economic sanctions. But I'm just not sure if it should be against Israel or Palestinians. No, I'm coming around to perhaps some economic sanctions.
Where are you on allowing bags of potato chips into the Gaza Strip? That's tough.
I haven't. Yeah.
I think that's on the
potato chips in.
I think that's on the embargoed list.
Wow.
I read that one time. Could be wrong.
Wow.
So
no potato.
They prevent a lot of things. Everything that goes in and out of Gaza goes across the conveyor belt with some IDF lady. Like, no, yes, kites, yes, wait. I don't know. So
I think America doesn't have much influence around the world. Israel, I think America has influence. So I think we need to explore some options.
Did you see that the House Democrats pulled $1 billion out of the funding of the Israeli Iron Dome?
Yes. But Iron Dome is partly designed by Raytheon. When you give $1 billion to Israel for Iron Dome, you're really subsidizing domestic
jobs and lives.
Yeah.
Don't you think that that's the hardest conversation that especially left-wing progressives, never want to grapple with? And you could speak to the insurance issue even more because you're so passionate about that, as am I. But I mean, you talk and think about it even more than I do, and I think about it a lot. But with the defense budget being almost $1 trillion, so much of that money does go to families, communities, individuals. It is the military-industrial complex budget, those billions of dollars, is coursing through the bank accounts and veins of Americans all over the country. Rich, obviously, middle and lower class folks who are probably working on building weapons themselves.
So they're very adept at spreading these jobs along congressional districts.
Yes, and bases too. Yes.
Yeah. Well, looking at my life and the choices I've made, I don't need that much money. I need peace and quiet. Mm-hmm. I would like quiet neighbors, healthy food, love, exercise, friends. And I don't think I would take a job that resulted in denying a child health care. I don't think I would take a job making weapons. I just don't think I would be an executioner if that were my only choice. I know that sounds glib. I've had an easier life. I'm a white male, so my life has been easier than, more than half of America's. But I don't think you have to take a job working for Aetna. I don't think you have to be an engineer working for Raytheon. So this country doesn't believe in collective guilt. As somebody who's felt guilty his whole life, I think we let ourselves off too easily. I think we have to ask people, yes, what America does is horrible around the world, but what are you doing to abet, to be complicit in it?
Well,
we're too easy on ourselves in the United States.
I think that is super thoughtful. I like your kind of moral code in terms of what you need. I think other people need a pool, maybe a second home, maybe 5 or 6 cars because they like cars.
Or maybe if they had a cock that worked, they wouldn't need any of that stuff.
You think that men that have a lot of cars have flat tire?
Yes, I do. Well said. Yes, I do.
And you say all that, but then you do gigs for ExxonMobil, opiate makers, as well as you recently did a gig for the company who builds the Iron Dome.
I think of myself as taking their money. It's less money for Raytheon. I would never. Would I do money? Would I do? It's interesting.
ExxonMobil wants you to do a half-hour set at their corporate convention, and it's $10,000. Do you take the gig?
No.
You do take the gig.
Maybe 10 years ago I would have. Maybe 10 years ago I would have.
You take the gig. You take the gig, and you pocket a smaller percentage of the money than you donate to an environmental organization, because they're going to hire another comedian and he's just going to pocket it all and buy hookers and blow.
True. Or I could take the gig and bomb, but say what I wanted to say. It's a tough, it's not a tough question. I don't, first of all, they're never going to ask me to, I can barely get Greenpeace to invite me. So, let alone ExxonMobil. But we're complicit, you know, when I hear the question I always ask Democrats when they tell me they're for Medicare for all, I say, are you in favor of putting the health insurance companies out of business? And then they balk. And I say, you can't be for Medicare for all. You can't run for office and say you're for Medicare for all unless you're willing to say, I want Aetna, Blue Cross, United Healthcare to go out of business. And these politicians, these Democrats, to a man and woman will say, well, I think there's a way around that. And I say, then you're full of it. There's no way around keeping those corporations and having Medicare for all. So you're not for Medicare for all. And people say to me, but these people need jobs. And I say, well, these people need operations and chemo. And these jobs are what keep people from getting their chemo.
Where are you on people getting chemo?
I'm against it. But that's for different reasons.
Oh. I think
I do think Medicare for all is the issue of that's. Although I think I'm out of touch. I'm so convinced that Medicare for all is the answer. And then you read about the anti-vaxxers. You talk to these anti-vaxxers. They don't wake up every morning thinking, boy, I wish I had opportunity to go see my doctor. I think a lot of people don't like doctors, you know?
Yeah, I've been learning that. But here's the issue, which I know you understand this, but I do want to get your response to it. Let me try to do it in under a minute, which is we talked about the military and the fact that they have people working in all district. It's spread very calculated. It is. These jobs are spread into districts, and they buy those congressmen with donations. But more importantly, then you've got the VA and military bases. Those are all jobs. If you want to transform from spending money on the military to on health care, if you want to get rid of those jobs and get rid of the health insurance jobs, then those are going to be jobs in these congressional districts and senators' districts, local, state, federal. They're going to then lose elections as a result. And also, those companies make campaign donations. So I feel like this issue that you and I want to see a transformation of our economy and our society away from militarization and to the real national security threat, which is a heart attack, and only country in the world that goes bankrupt on medical bills. What's hard about that is you can't elect people that can do that, because the job loss and what that would mean in real life and the campaign donations that these companies all make. You got to fix those seemingly intractable problems. Is that fair to say, what I've just said?
No. It's an excuse for why we're not getting there.
It's a reason, though, rather than an excuse.
It's a reason.
Yeah.
You have to look at it like World War II. There were many reasons not to take Hitler on. There were many reasons not to go to the moon. I can give you 100 reasons not to get married, 1,000,000 reasons not to have children. I'm one of the reasons not to have children. Eventually, you have to wake the American people up and say, this is right, this is wrong. Nobody should go bankrupt because of a lump. There's basic human decency. nobody, I mean, they're giving out free vaccines, but not free insulin, not free. I mean, it's just
well, people
values.
who are diabetic because they're overweight, and they're overweight because they chose to be. They should have controlled their eating, Feldman. That's different than COVID. You could be in great shape and make all the right decisions in terms of your personal responsibility, and you could still.
But that's not true about diabetes.
Well, I do think what's true is if you're overweight, that's often how you get type 2 diabetes. Oh, you're talking about type 1 where it's congenital, where you're born with it?
Yeah.
I think those people should get insulin for free.
How about
I don't believe any of what I just said. I'm just making.
No, I'm thinking. Do I really want to say no?
Well, it is the winning argument against this stupidity about you made those choices. You don't want a baby, don't have sex. You don't want to be overweight. Control your eating. The argument is, well, what if someone was born that way? And then they'll usually make an exception for that. Especially if they were born as a result of...
They hate black people. Black people are born that way. They hate gay people. Gay people are born that way. The Republicans
being born black in America, I think a lot of whites believe is a personal choice.
Yeah, you're right.
Which is why they never make that. Why don't they ever make the choice, though, to be born black? I wonder what that's about. I wonder if you could, if you would.
So that would be funny to say that. It's not my problem. You chose to be black.
Well, I got an idea for like a joke / like a column or something, but I want you to write it right now, which is this stupid argument about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and personal responsibility and all the arguments they make about that. And now what we're asking those people who make those arguments often to do is sit in their recliner. I'll come to you. I'll come to you. You don't have to get up. Just, just leave the door unlocked. Text me, leave the door unlocked, and I'll come over and give you a shot. That's the personal responsibility I'm looking for. But yet that's not personal responsibility, Feldman. Getting a shot. They don't argue it.
Are you the vaxxers?
Yeah. The anti-vax people are the people who say, stop making bad choices. Don't have sex. Don't be lazy. All this shit. And they're destroying the country, literally killing people because they won't get a shot.
Right. It's a little more complicated than that.
Oh, wow. Somebody's got empathy now.
No. I'm saying these people deserve to die.
Oh.
It's a little more. They're it's easy to hate the anti-vaxxers. I hate the people who create anti-vaxxers, the people who are pushing ivermectin, the people who are sowing seeds of doubt about the vaccines, the people who don't trust the vaccine but keep it to themselves and end up dying because of that. I feel tremendous sympathy.
Okay, yes, I agree with that. But again, the hypocrisy. You literally do live reads for ivermectin, and you're over here saying wouldn't take.
Yes, I do. A lot of my listeners are horses. So I have whores. Whores.
Oh, and those who are promiscuous, somehow ivermectin.
Whores, yeah.
Well, what do you want to do?
Go ahead. I'm sorry. What?
How do we ever fix a system, a media atmosphere where everybody can and does have a show? My dad's show launches on my network soon.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And
is that true?
I just thought of it, but as I said it out loud, I was like, that might be the best idea I've ever had. So,
though, if it got bigger numbers than your show,
probably would. He's a big deal. So.
Yeah. Everybody has a podcast. Everybody has a show. Everybody's on social media. You
can say whatever you want without consequence. So people are going to continue to be misinformed and believe what you're talking about. So what do we do about that? There's nothing we can do about that. I feel like I always end up with, I don't know what to do.
Guard the school boards. If you're a parent, get involved with your schools because that's what the anti-vaxxers, that's what the Republicans are doing. That's what Ralph Reed from the Christian Coalition, they're all starting from the grassroots, and it's the school boards. Because once you change the schools, you've changed America. Right now, I look at Trump, I look at the Republicans, and I think back to my kids when they were in kindergarten, and I took solace in the fact that all the behavior you see on the right would not be tolerated in kindergarten. But that's going to change. They're going to start teaching kids not to share, that might makes right.
Sticks and stones do break your bones.
Yeah. We're getting there.
I think that is an unbelievably great answer. I was not expecting that. Guard the school boards with reasonable, critically thinking, educated people who still respect.
That's this whole critical race theory.
Yeah, dude, I've been involved in that. Just so you know, my listeners know. In my town, I've spoken, and I'm in constant contact with the right wing leader of the town, who's an influential Facebook poster. I'm all about it. It's happening right now in Clarkstown, New York.
They do not want the civil rights movement in Texas. They don't want Cesar Chavez and Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks taught in our schools. So what is the argument you're going up against?
The argument I'm going up against in my town is the argument being fed from the media outlets that you're describing. You know, this is where they're getting their information, which is all the standard stuff about CRT, and they've extended that to its, quote, derivative, diversity and inclusion, because diversity and inclusion, Feldman, is just code for CRT, which is the indoctrination of whites into being self-hating snowflakes. And what are you doing to our kids? My kid comes home and hates herself just because she's a white American.
So you're not allowed to teach that slavery was bad? What is the argument that you're up against?
They don't make that argument very well. Upon light examination, they will just say they don't like diversity and inclusion and some of this anti-bullying stuff. Maybe they wouldn't say that. I don't know. But we have to use I think to combat it, we need to stop using the words diversity and inclusion and just use bigger words that don't buzz to them. Just like, no, we're doing a cheesecake workshop. And it's going to be great. And then you teach all the diversity and inclusion you can, but they're like, then eventually they'll be like, cheesecake.
But what is the argument? What are they complaining about?
What part
in your school? When you shine light on it, what are they, other than the fact that they don't want to admit that they're racist? What are the specifics?
Teaching young people to hate America, indoctrinating them into progressive liberal values.
And the specifics being you cannot teach that we rounded up the Japanese and put them in internment camps?
No, we're fine with that one.
I know we're fine with locking the Japanese up. Are we fine with teaching that to our kids?
No, we're fine with teaching the internment camp, but only from the point of view of the Border Patrol.
Are you being serious?
No, I mean, they don't. I'm being serious in that your questions are all good and their answers would likely be, we're okay with teaching Dr. King. But then you teach Dr. King, and if they knew what he said, they'd be like, we're not okay with that. If they knew what Japanese internment was, they'd not be okay with that. They don't know about what's being taught. That's why the argument to them is, as I've made this guy, why are you interfering and telling teachers how to do their jobs? You parent, so if your kid comes home and feels bad about their whiteness, as a good parent, you can talk to them, and they should then be fine. This is parenting versus teaching, and the teachers aren't coming to your job and knocking the hose out of your hands because this guy is a firefighter.
Mm.
Yeah. But that would be like a teacher coming to him and telling him how to hold his hose.
Right. Oh, okay. I'm a pimp, so when you talk about holding my hose, I'm thinking of something else. I'm a benevolent pimp.
Oh, that's enough.
I'm a benevolent pimp. It's tough out there for a benevolent pimp. It really is.
So the Board of Education answer is a great answer. That's a great, great answer. How do Republicans, how have they done so well in this country being such a minority of actual people? Or do I have that wrong? The numbers.
You can march in goose step or lockstep if you want one specific thing, and that's money and power and hate. Money, power, and hatred. You can find, 20% of this country that falls on the side of hatred, money, and power. And I think the Republicans have been pretty smart. They've isolated the 33% of the Americans who have untreated mental illness, people who have some kind of childhood trauma that they're in denial about. And so the Republican Party has become this repository for people who lack self-reflection. They don't understand. They're angry and they don't know why. A lot of them were abused physically, psychologically as children. They're unwilling to acknowledge that. But they have this generalized hatred and anger that finds a home in the Republican Party. Instead of getting help, they get to act out in the Republican Party.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I would only ask,
that because my children are Republicans.
They are?
No, the joke is that I was an abusive father.
Right,
That's
I missed
the joke.
that was I should edit out me missing that.
We should keep it in. But I swung for the fences and struck out.
What do you're talking about? You're talking about the deplorables.
Yes, and they are deplorable.
I think there's a lot of truth to that, but those folks would hear what you just said. What you said is they're broken and they had events and in their lives that are traumatic and unresolved, and they then act out as a result. And they might not agree with that. What would you say? I don't know. I don't know what they would
think. I probably don't care. I mean, I look at Steve Bannon. I look at Donald Trump. Clearly narcissistic personality disorder, has never seen a shrink, has never gone for medication. I look at Don Jr. I look at Kellyanne Conway. These are people who had childhood trauma. They grew up thinking that they're bad and that people are bad. They're godless. They have a dementia that is untreated. There's no question about that.
So do
certain Democrats. I think Bill Clinton is also
but I think it's different on Democrats, and not all. There's certainly a huge percentage of them that fall into this category I'm about to say, which is that 33% or 20%, whatever you want to say. They also have a real lack of understanding about how basic government works, how civics works, because they really don't understand how the teachers get paid and how the roads get paved and why the electric stays on or why it gets fixed pretty quickly, even when it takes a long time, versus the rest of the world. They don't understand, most importantly, haven't traveled, how other countries manage their economies and elect their people and educate and healthcare. They don't understand that stuff, the basic fundamentals. I think
they don't want to.
They don't. Why not?
Because it makes them feel stupid. It makes them, if somebody knows something that I don't know, instead of embracing that and saying, "Gee, it's a big world. I can't know everything," there's so much self-loathing that they lash out at people like a Fauci. They can't respect Anthony Fauci because he's a doctor. And a doctor reminds me of how ignorant I am. So instead, I'm going to belittle the teachers. I'm going to belittle anybody with a degree because that makes me feel educated.
Do you think that folks that believe that understand that that's why they feel that way, that this doctor makes me feel less than, and that's why I don't. You don't think that because that's too deep emotional work or something?
Yeah. They're it's cruel to say this, but the people who voted for Trump, well, they tend to be racist and they tend to be white and they think they're smarter than they actually are, but they're not that smart. They're not readers, but they think they're smart and they have a sense of entitlement, and that sense of entitlement gets shaken when they're confronted with somebody who has actual credentials and reminds them, you know what? A lot of people are smart, not just you. They can't handle that, so they try to destroy any authority that they're confronted by. People who voted for Trump, people who are in the Republican Party, hate authority figures. Unless they're police officers, they hate anybody with authority because authority reminds them of how inadequate they are.
And there's a certain segment that also hate law enforcement as well.
In the Republican Party.
Yeah, sure.
Unless it's a cop killing an unarmed black man.
They actually make exceptions. Normally I hate cops, but that Derek Chauvin.
Right. Right. They do hate the deep dark state. They hate the FBI.
Yeah. There is no deep dark state. You can't take on their language. It's not Turkey. I mean, the FBI. I hate that because it gives the FBI and the CIA way more credit than they deserve. They are so often bumbling. I mean, the CIA didn't tell the FBI about the hijackers. We're reminded about that every year, that they were here. They didn't. I mean, they're not that conspiracy. They can't get the shit done that they're accused of being able to pull off. So I hate the deep state thing. But you said they're not readers, Feldman. What is reading? What do you mean by that comment? And what is reading? Why is that an important thing for folks to do to kind of understand how government functions, how civics, how life works in this country, much less others?
First of all, I want to be careful because I know a lot of people. There are a lot of people with dyslexia. There are a lot of my listeners. I'm not being funny here. A lot of my listeners can't read. I've discovered that. I'm sure a lot of your listeners can't read.
No, all my listeners. I don't know what you're talking about. All my listeners can read.
Okay, there are a lot of people who can't read. They have dyslexia. They might be illiterate. That doesn't mean they're ill-informed. So
whatever my listeners' learning disabilities are, they have it totally under control, and they're working at making that better, and they listen to books on tape.
Right. And that's why they listen to podcasts. So I'm being serious.
I know. You're being sensitive, and I'm not, and that was what's happening. Now, to the point of reading and its importance.
If you can read, or if you can listen to a book on tape, or if you can watch a documentary, or a legitimate news source, like they're harder and harder to find. If you're not doing that, then you're not a thinker. If you're not taking in information from reliable news sources, if you say something to the effect, well, who's to say what's a reliable news source? Well, then you're ignorant and you're part of the problem. When people say, I do my own research, and they don't know which websites to go to, which magazines and newspapers to subscribe to, they lack the literacy to make informed decisions. There's a difference between the New York Times and greenfootballs.com or whatever, Instapundit, whatever. There's just a difference. The New York Times, and it is problem. The New York Times is a problem. It's not perfect, but they have close to 1,200 reporters searching for truth. The LA Times, they're in the truth gathering business. Yes, it's a little biased, but don't confuse their editorial page with their news gathering operation.
Well, if we're talking about science, what's the difference between me doing my research on a health-related issue or a weather-related, climate-related issue versus someone who has an MD in meteorology?
It's the difference.
Meteorology, don't trust them.
It's the difference between my getting on a flight to Los Angeles and you saying, I read a book on how to fly a 737. I don't trust this pilot. I'm going to fly it instead. And I go, do you have like a license? No, I don't. I did my own, that's the difference.
I have a flight simulator app.
Yeah. But I go to, you want credentialed people.
Yeah.
Yes, they're probably not as good as you want them to be because they're humans, and many of them are corrupt. But I'd rather have somebody who has been trained to know something as opposed to somebody who sits in his underwear eating Cheetos, looking up cures for COVID. Something tells me that's not reliable research.
David Feldman, you've said a lot.
And things will never be the same between us.
And unfortunately,
we can't put it back
right
into the bottle.
We can't.
I could say I'm sorry, but it needed to be said.
Well, things are obviously going to be, I think there'll be a cooling off period is I think what'll happen between us.
But the sex will be good.
We've always got that. We've always got that.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time today.
Thank you for having me. You're the best. You really are. I was a little nervous. I didn't know what we were going to talk about. And I'm always amazed that when you and I get together, we can talk it only seemed like 4 hours. How long have we been doing this? It just, the 4 hours went by in the blink of an eye.
I've really got to go.
I love you.
I love you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Stand up. All right, there you go. David Feldman and Maura Quint. Hopefully you heard. And that is all I've got for you on today's show. Thanks for your support and for listening and for telling your friends and for subscribing with a paid subscription. If you haven't already, go to standupwithpete.com right now. I will talk to you tomorrow. Jon Carroll, take us away, my friend.
Get up off of your knees. When you can't see the forest for the burning trees, you got to stand up. Hey, you've been sitting so long, you got the creaky knees, you got to stand up. Stand up. I think your driving wheels been leaking grease. Boy, you better stand up. Stand up. Well, there's a whole lot more of us who know what's right. They'll keep right on ignoring us if we keep sitting tight. You got to open up the window to let in some light. You got to stand up. That's right. You got to rise up. You got to stand up. You got to stare the devil straight in the eye. We got to let him know it's his turn to go. See it clear when all you hear is a lie. So get up off of your butt, get down off of your fence. Even if it ain't a very friendly audience, well, they'll begin to listen when you start making sense. And you stand up, stand up. No need to point your rifle to defend your town. Just stand up, stand up. You know they can't deny you what you're laying down. Boy, you better stand up, stand up. Show your face of every color, yellow, black, red, and brown. She's the place where every lost child will finally be found. There's only one thing to do before we stand our ground, and that's stand up, stand up. Well, the founding fathers saw a land for all. They had to stand up, they had to stand up. They had a keen imagination for a crystal ball, drawing all the plans of stand up. But all they had to go on was the time they were in, with other causes for laws, and since they weren't even sin, they knew that change was gonna come before the change could begin. They had to stand up. All right, they had to stand up. We got to stand up. We got to look the devil square in the eye. We gotta let him know it's his time to go and make it clear when all we hear is a lie. Why you lying awake wondering where the money all went? It'll be the cost of freedom that'll go unspent. You can see him flee the scene of that experiment if you stand up. All right, we got to speak up. We got to reach up and raise your voice in every way you know how. Don't be toes up. You got to show up. Ain't no better time to do it but now. No need to pledge allegiance to no wanton tribe. Rise up, show obedience to the voice inside, and listen well and it'll tell you not to run and hide. It says stand up.